Thanks very much for staying with us. Time now for Eye on Africa with me, Georgia Calvin-Smith. Tonight, trust in over a dozen big-name banks is broken in South Africa over a rand price-fixing scandal. Also, as international calls for DR Congo's government and opposition to move more quickly in setting up a transitional administration key to elections later this year, we take a look at one thing that has already started: the delivery of gear to collect and tally votes. And the devastating march of the armyworm continues across southern Africa. There are warnings that the food supply of the entire region could take an unsustainable hit if the pest's progress continues. But first, the ANC's called for the toughest possible sanctions to be brought against 17 top banks who've been accused of currency rigging. International names including HSBC, Bank of America and Barclays have been implicated in a rand price-fixing scandal. The Competition Commission's accused banks of coordinating trading when giving quotes to customers buying or selling South African and US currency. The case will be investigated further, but the Commission's recommended that involved banks, if found guilty, should be fined 10% of their South African annual revenue. Jane Flanagan tells us more about public anger over the alleged collusion.
We're not talking about the rate at which the rand has been set, whether it's been artificially high or artificially low. What the subject here is the speed with which the rand has fluctuated. So we've seen a lot of volatility in the currency over the for as long as anyone can remember, great highs and great lows, and that has meant that we've seen sudden price increases. It's affected imports and exports. So it's been very hard for people to do any meaningful financial planning, and that has affected families. It's affected small businesses. It's created a very, very difficult context, economic atmosphere in which people can operate or make sensible planning decisions. So it has affected a lot of people.
So the Democratic Alliance, the opposition in South Africa, is accusing President Jacob Zuma of trying to politicize this issue. But isn't it a pretty legitimate issue to get political about?
Well, there is the Competition Commission, which is an independent structure, and the DA is saying that that particular organisation should be left alone without political interference to get on with its investigation. And then there will be a discussion about what the consequences will be for the banks in terms of a punishment. I think what the DA fears is going on here is that Jacob Zuma is using this as an opportunity to drive a new broom through the financial institutions, which really are very representative of the old South Africa. They're run by older, pale males who are really reflect the very slow change of pace of economic upturn in the fortunes of the majority black population in South Africa. And Jacob Zuma is using this as an opportunity to get to grips with the bank and force through a much more radical economic agenda of his own, which he hopes will win back some of the voters he lost last year.
Jane Flanagan there for us in Cape Town. Now, Al-Shabaab extremists have claimed responsibility for a mortar strike that killed 2 children near the presidential palace on Thursday. It happened during the handover ceremony at which Somalia's new leader, Mohamed Abdullahi Mohamed, officially took office. The violence underlines the challenge he faces in turning the country around. Julia Steers tells us more.
Mortars were launched toward the presidential palace from Baraka Market, which is in a residential area of the capital, Mogadishu, and just a few kilometers away from the palace. 2 children were confirmed dead, as you said, and 5 others injured at this point. And the attack was staged during a handover ceremony from the old president to the newly elected President Formaggio, who was elected last week, and he's expected to be inaugurated next Wednesday. And here in Somalia and in Mogadishu particularly, there was a collective sigh of relief after al-Shabaab stayed quiet during the election and this beginning of the transfer of power. But just several days ago, the terrorist group reappeared and pledged to, quote, resume operations. So today's attack could be the beginning of the group making good on that promise. For the last few days, I've been embedded with African Union troops in Mogadishu and at forward operating bases. They're moving troops to these outer bases to fortify against some upcoming planned attacks, they say. And the main threat is IED attacks. Just yesterday, there was a car bomb attack near one of these bases at a checkpoint just about 30 kilometers from Mogadishu. AU Special Forces are conducting neighborhood patrols in the city with Somali police, and they are conducting checkpoints throughout the city overnight. So they say they're on the lookout for an uptick in attacks and are working to try to keep things on track as the transition to a new government begins here.
Julia Steers there for us. Now, Burundi's backed down from a threat to pull its troops out from the African Union peacekeeping mission in Somalia. The planned withdrawal was in protest over the payment of soldiers' wages. AMISOM salaries are funded by the European Union but dispersed by the AU. Bujumbura didn't receive them for months as the EU tried to avoid sending money directly to the crisis-hit government. An agreement has allegedly been reached allowing money to bypass the central bank and be paid through a private one. There are calls for the Congolese government and opposition parties to do more to set up the transitional government agreed in a power-sharing deal on New Year's Eve. It's a key step in the preparations for elections due at the end of this year. Our Thomas Nicolon has been taking a look at the logistical preparations for a vote vital to bringing an end to the extended mandate of President Joseph Kabila.
More than 3 tons of equipment loaded into a helicopter. The Congolese Electoral Commission is about to deliver the gear that will help enlist new voters. The UN Stabilization Mission is supporting this process.
The UN Security Council asked us to support the enlistment of new voters. It's important because the Electoral Commission asked us to do it in places they can't go to, places that are hard to get to, where there are no roads.
Kimvula territory is a remote area at the heart of the Congo Central province, 120 kilometers south of Kinshasa. The easiest way to get there is by helicopter. It is the only way electoral equipment can be delivered to the local authorities.
Helicopters are here, the equipment is here too. I think everything is ready. We have our equipment, which our people have been waiting for anxiously, so the electoral file can be adjusted. We are convinced the election will be held by December 2017.
Voter cards, registering kits, and even laminating film. All the essential equipment is unloaded. The people of Kimvula have come to help.
I'm really very happy we received the equipment. We've been waiting for it. We were told it would get here eventually, and we've been here since morning.
We're going to get our new voter cards, and then we'll be able to vote. It's important for me to vote, as it is for almost everyone here.
The political context is still tense in DR Congo, but the agreement reached on the 31st of December says the election will be held by late 2017. In spite of financial issues, the Electoral Commission and the MONUSCO seem determined to stick to the deadline.
The march of the armyworm continues. The UN's warned that the infestation of the caterpillars, which are devastating crops across southern Africa, is threatening to strip the supplies of the entire region.
The fall armyworm is a new threat in southern Africa, but in America it first appeared in 1957. They are called armyworms, but are in fact caterpillars who eat maize, wheat, millet and rice. These are key food sources in southern Africa, where many areas are already struggling after years of drought. The countries currently most at risk are South Africa, Zimbabwe, Malawi, Zambia, Namibia and Mozambique. The caterpillar does the damage, but it's the adult moth that goes long distances. This explains how it's spread across Africa. To address the issue, the UN's Food Agency has just held a 3-day emergency meeting in Zimbabwe.
The pest has affected countries that are the main producers of maize, a key staple for most of southern Africa.
According to the UN, up to 130,000 hectares of crops could be affected in Zimbabwe, 90,000 in Zambia and 50,000 in Namibia. In Zimbabwe, the pest has been detected in all of the country's 10 provinces.
The government of Zimbabwe launched chemical spraying operations to control this pest in an attempt to mitigate its impact.
Apart from pesticides, other options are to dig trenches around the fields or use natural predators like birds. But sometimes the only solution is to burn the crops.
Well, that's it for Eye on Africa for now. Thanks very much for watching us, and do so again if you can. Take care.